Without respect, a woman will never fully desire you. She might stay, she might enjoy the attention, she might even say she cares. But attraction without respect is chemistry without foundation. It burns hot, then dies quietly. Most men never see it happening because they're tracking the wrong signals. They're watching her words, her affection, her reassurance. Meanwhile, respect is eroding beneath the surface. And by the time they notice, it's already gone. This is primal mind, where psychology meets instinct, where modern dating dynamics are decoded not through theory, but through observable human behavior. Today, we're breaking down 5 male attitudes that don't just create attraction, they build respect. The kind of respect that makes a woman submit to your direction without you forcing, explaining, or convincing anything. If you're honest with yourself, at least one of these attitudes is costing you more than you realize. If you've ever felt respect slip away and couldn't explain why, drop respect in the comments. Core principle. Here's the truth most men never hear. A woman's respect doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes when your internal frame collapses. Respect isn't something you convince her to give. It's something she responds to when your position is solid, consistent, and self-directed. That's why attraction doesn't last on chemistry alone. Chemistry opens the door. Attitude keeps it open. And today, we're talking about the 5 attitudes that naturally command respect, and yes, make women submit to masculine leadership without resistance. Attitude 1. Self-approved. Most men don't think they're trying to be liked. They think they're being respectful, emotionally intelligent, mature, easy to be with. But underneath all of that is one unspoken belief running the show. If she approves of me, I'm safe. And that belief doesn't stay in your head. It bleeds into your behavior in ways you never consciously choose. You hesitate before speaking. You soften opinions that matter to you. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You agree faster than you should. You tolerate small disrespect because confrontation feels risky. None of this looks dramatic. There's no argument, no blow-up. And that's why it's deadly. Women don't consciously analyze this. They feel it. What they feel is a man who adjusts himself to be accepted instead of directing himself from the inside. And here's the brutal part. A man who needs to be liked is not leading the interaction. He's reacting to it. Respect cannot exist where leadership is missing. Let me ground this in something real. A guy I worked with, let's call him Marcus, early 30s, solid career, decent shape, kept running into the same wall. Dates would start strong. Conversation flowed. Chemistry was there. Then, somewhere around the 3rd or 4th date, the energy shifted. Text slowed. Interest faded. Marcus couldn't understand why. When we broke it down, it wasn't what he said. It was how he adjusted. The moment he sensed even a hint of pullback, he became smoother. Quieter. More agreeable. Less himself. He thought he was being considerate. What she felt was uncertainty. And uncertainty kills respect fast. Now, let's clear up a major misconception. Not needing to be liked does not mean being rude, cold, aloof, or emotionally unavailable. Those are defense mechanisms, not strength. Not needing to be liked means you don't abandon yourself to keep the peace. It means you're willing to let there be friction, to let her disagree, to let tension exist without rushing in to smooth it over like it's a fire you need to put out. That's emotional strength. And women respect emotional strength. When you validate yourself, you don't need her to do it for you. And that's grounding. A man who trusts his own judgment, values, and reactions creates a sense of stability around him. He speaks without rehearsing. He says no without apologizing. He disagrees without getting defensive. He walks away when necessary without explaining himself into exhaustion. And when he's misunderstood, he stays centered instead of scrambling to fix the narrative. Here's the paradox most men miss. The less you try to be liked, the more your approval matters. Because approval from someone who doesn't need it feels earned. Women don't lose respect because you're imperfect. They lose it when you don't trust yourself under pressure. So shift the goal. Stop trying to be liked. Start being rooted. When a woman realizes you're comfortable being misunderstood, Comfortable standing alone if required, respect stops being conditional. And for the first time, attraction has something solid to attach to. If you've ever given too much of yourself away to keep someone interested, drop rooted. Attitude 2, your own pace. This one sounds simple, almost boring, but this is where a lot of men quietly lose the game without ever realizing it. Because men who rush don't look eager, they look uncertain. And uncertainty kills respect faster than almost anything else. Think about how rushing shows up. You rush to text back. You rush to explain how you feel. You rush to lock things down, define the relationship, secure commitment, get reassurance. On the surface, it looks like interest, like confidence, like decisiveness. But underneath, the message is very different. What you're really communicating is this: I don't trust myself if this doesn't work out. And women feel that immediately. Here's a situation you've probably lived through. You meet a woman you genuinely like. The first few interactions are great. Energy is high. Then naturally things shift a little. Her replies slow down. She's less enthusiastic. Maybe she cancels plans once. Nothing dramatic, just enough ambiguity to create uncertainty. Now watch the fork in the road. A man who moves at her pace panics. He sends a long text, then another. He asks, "What changed?" He tries to clear the air. He over-explains his intentions. He thinks he's being emotionally mature. A man who moves at his own pace notices the shift and doesn't abandon himself. He doesn't pretend not to care, but he also doesn't speed up to chase certainty. He stays steady, and that steadiness is power. Ask yourself this honestly. When things slow down, do you speed up or do you stay centered? This matters because women are always scanning for emotional leadership, not in a manipulative way, in a survival way. They're asking, consciously or not, if things get unclear, does this man collapse or does he remain grounded? Let me give you a concrete example. A guy I'll call Evan, late 20s, lives in Chicago. Smart, driven, good social skills. He meets a woman through friends, strong connection early. Then she starts replying slower. Evan feels the tension rise. His instinct: address it immediately. Ask where he stands. Make sure everything's okay. But instead, he holds his pace. He still initiates when it feels right. He still lives his life. He doesn't overcorrect. A week later, she reaches back out, more engaged than before. Not because he played games, but because he didn't collapse when uncertainty showed up. His steadiness did the talking. Now let's be clear. Moving at your own pace does not mean playing hard to get. It doesn't mean withholding affection. It doesn't mean acting distant or emotionally unavailable. That's insecurity wearing a mask. What it means is this: you don't let her emotional fluctuations dictate your behavior. You still show interest. You still initiate, but you don't over-adjust. Because the moment her uncertainty becomes your urgency, the dynamic flips. She becomes the prize. You become the pursuer, and respect drains out of the room. Here's a line you should remember. Attraction needs space to breathe. Rush, and you suffocate it. Women respect men they can't rush, pressure, or emotionally hijack. When you move at your own pace, you're saying without words, I enjoy you, but I don't abandon myself for outcomes. And that's when curiosity deepens into respect. Something subtle happens here. She's no longer just choosing you. She starts qualifying herself. She starts wondering, can I keep up with this man's rhythm? Can I meet him where he is? That's the shift most men never experience because they are too busy trying to secure the outcome. Let me hit this from another angle. Rushing is often disguised as clarity seeking. Men say, I just want to know where I stand. But what they really want is relief from discomfort. And leadership isn't about eliminating discomfort. It's about tolerating it without losing direction. A grounded man can sit inside uncertainty without flailing. He doesn't need immediate answers to remain stable. And that emotional steadiness communicates confidence more loudly than any declaration ever could. This isn't about being slow, it's about being self-trusting. When you trust that you'll be okay, regardless of the outcome, your pace naturally steadies. And women feel that as safety, strength, and authority. If you've ever rushed to lock things down and watched it backfire, drop steady. Attitude 3. Silent standards. This one separates men who are respected from men who are negotiated with, and there is nothing that drains respect faster than being negotiable when attraction is on the line. Weak men don't actually have standards. What they have are preferences, and preferences disappear the moment they're afraid of losing someone. They say they value consistency, honesty, effort. But the second those things are tested, they explain, excuse, tolerate, and adapt, not because they're kind, but because they're afraid. Here's the core mistake. Most men believe standards are something you communicate. They think boundaries work best when clearly explained. They think respect comes from being understood. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable, even healthy. But here's the problem. The moment you announce a standard, you turn it into a discussion. And discussions invite testing. Women don't respect standards that need defending. They respect standards that are enforced through behavior. Let me make this concrete. A woman starts showing up inconsistently, cancels last minute, hot one week, cold the next. A man who announces standards sits her down and says something like, "I just want to be clear about what I expect. Consistency is really important to me. When you do this, it makes me feel a certain way." What he thinks he's doing is leadership. What she often feels is this: he's asking me to adjust so he can stay comfortable. That's not authority, that's bargaining, and bargaining destroys respect. Here's the reframe you need to tattoo into your brain. Standards are not rules you enforce on other people. They are filters you apply to your own investment. You don't tell a woman how to behave. You decide how much access she gets based on how she behaves. That's the shift. A man with real standards doesn't confront every misalignment. He doesn't lecture, he doesn't threaten, he doesn't warn. He simply adjusts. Less availability, less emotional access, less effort, no drama, no punishment, no attitude, just alignment. I'll give you a real-world example. A guy named Daniel, early 40s, divorced, solid career. He starts dating again and meets a woman he likes. Early on, she starts pushing boundaries, showing up late, rescheduling casually, treating plans like suggestions. Old version of Daniel would have explained how much he values respect and communication. New Daniel does something different. He doesn't say much at all. He just stops rearranging his life to accommodate her inconsistency. No speech, no confrontation, just a quiet recalibration. She notices. And here's the key. She doesn't feel punished. She feels the absence of access. And that absence communicates standards more clearly than any explanation ever could. If you feel the urge to explain a boundary so she gets it, check yourself. That urge is usually about preserving connection, not protecting self-respect. You want her to understand so you don't have to risk losing her. Don't misunderstand me. There is a place for clear communication. There is a place for naming boundaries. But there's also a discipline most men avoid because it's uncomfortable. Holding standards quietly. Quiet standards require emotional discipline. They force you to sit with discomfort. They force you to accept that someone may not rise to your expectations. They force you to walk away without closure, without validation, without the satisfaction of being understood. That's why most men don't do it. They'd rather explain than adjust. They'd rather talk than act. They'd rather negotiate than lose access. A man who talks about his standards is asking for cooperation. A man who lives his standards doesn't need it. Here's the paradox. When you stop announcing your standards, women become more curious about them, because now they have to read your behavior. They start noticing patterns. He doesn't chase when I pull back. He doesn't overextend when I underdeliver. He doesn't react emotionally to misalignment. And that's where respect grows. Let's kill another misconception. Holding standards does not mean being cold, rigid, or unforgiving. That's ego pretending to be strength. Real standards are calm, consistent, almost boring to argue with. There's nothing to push against. You don't punish, you don't threaten, you don't warn. You simply don't give premium access to behavior that doesn't align. Women don't rise to standards you announce. They rise to standards you live without apology. If you've ever over-explained a boundary and watched it get ignored, drop standards. Attitude 4. Emotionally steady. Women respect emotional stability, not because they're judging you, not because they want perfection, but because pressure reveals who you are when you're not in control. And that answer comes fast. A lot of men confuse being emotional with being expressive, open, passionate, vulnerable. None of that is the real issue. The issue is what happens to you when uncertainty shows up, when the ground shifts, when clarity disappears, because that's when your nervous system takes over and tells the truth. Here's what pressure looks like in real life: mixed signals, delayed replies, mood swings, hot and cold behavior, sudden distance, disagreements that don't resolve cleanly, emotional ambiguity. And the moment it appears, two types of men reveal themselves. A reactive man spirals. He demands clarity. He sends long texts. He withdraws dramatically. He gets passive-aggressive. He over-explains. He explodes emotionally, or he collapses into reassurance mode, trying to stabilize the situation by giving more of himself. A steady man notices, pauses, stays centered, responds without reacting. That difference is everything. Let me ground this. A woman pulls back for a few days. A reactive man assumes danger. He sends, "Hey, is everything okay?" Then another message. Then he explains how much he likes her. Then he asks for reassurance. What she feels isn't closeness, it's emotional weight, pressure, responsibility for his state. A steady man notices the pullback and stays consistent. He doesn't chase, he doesn't punish, he doesn't dramatize. He gives space without disappearing. And that balance, presence without pressure, is rare. Rarity creates respect. Here's what most men miss. Women don't create pressure to be cruel. Pressure is a filter. It reveals how you handle not being in control. If uncertainty makes you anxious, defensive, or needy, she will feel it instantly. Not intellectually, viscerally. Emotional steadiness doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means your emotions don't drive your behavior. You can feel uncertainty without acting from fear. You can feel disappointment without collapsing. You can feel attraction without losing yourself. That's masculine emotional intelligence. And women respect men who can hold emotional space without being overwhelmed by it. If you've ever reacted emotionally and regretted it later, drop steady. Attitude 5. Life over relationship. This is hard for men to hear because it sounds selfish, cold, like you don't care. But in reality, this is the foundation of lasting respect. When a woman becomes the center of your life, you stop being the center of yourself. And the moment your gravity disappears, so does her respect. If losing her would collapse your sense of direction, she feels that weight. And no one respects what they have to carry. Let's talk real scenarios. You stop going to the gym because she wants more time. You stop seeing your friends because she doesn't like them. You stop pushing your purpose because the relationship feels good enough. You think you're investing. What you're actually doing is over-prioritizing. A man who values his life more than the relationship still shows up. He still cares. He still commits. What he doesn't do is trade his mission for connection. He doesn't shrink to maintain peace. He doesn't cling to avoid loss. He leads his life, and she chooses whether she wants to walk beside him. Let's kill one last myth. Valuing your life more does not mean neglecting her. It means your identity doesn't dissolve into the relationship. You don't chase to keep her. You don't cling to feel secure. You don't abandon your direction to feel chosen. Women respect men who are anchored, men who have gravity, men whose lives are already full, and who invite her into that fullness rather than asking her to complete it. If you take nothing else from this video, remember this. Respect is built through how you move, how you respond, and what you tolerate. Not through words, not through promises, through behavior under pressure over time. Drop a comment with one word, anchored or grounded. Let it mark the shift you're committing to. And if you want more of this clear, grounded, real-world psychology for men, subscribe and join a growing community of men who are done chasing approval and ready to build real self-respect, direction, and strength. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next one.